Now, musically, there's no singular sound identified with Louisiana's capital city. Yet Baton Rouge is memorialized in song by one of country music's most legendary performers.
I have to ask you, Baton Rouge, is it time?
When Garth Brooks played it live in 2022 at Tiger Stadium, it registered on the Richter scale.
Got a smile love down in Baton Rouge. Yeah. It was good living with you.
Better Than Ezra rocketed from playing it for fraternity parties on campus to the multi-platinum album Deluxe that featured a #1 hit on Billboard's Modern Rock Tracks chart.
It was good.
Before them was John Fred Gourier. John Fred and his Playboy band hit #1 in early 1968 with one of the decade's most memorable songs.
Judy in the sky. Well, that's what you are.
Two blues greats born across the river from Baton Rouge also reached stardom. Slim Harpo from Lobdell was a master of the harmonica. Baby Scratch My Back hit #1 on Billboard's R&B chart in 1966. And Buddy Guy, a native of Lettsworth in Point Capee Parish, took the blues sound he nurtured in Louisiana to Chicago and ultimately became, according to Eric Clapton, the best guitar player alive. He won 11 Grammys and a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Are you damn right I got the blues? People from my head down to my shoes. Just a dream, just a dream.
A Baton Rouge high boy, Jimmy Clanton, topped the R&B charts in the late 1950s. And speaking of Venus in blue jeans, that's Kentwood's Britney Spears, the first pop icon of the late 90s and the biggest star of the early 2000s. She went from a Mouseketeer on the Mickey Mouse Club to the Princess of Pop. Louisiana musicians created another distinctive blend of pop music. Swamp pop, as it's known, is a blend of early rock and roll, R&B, and country with a Cajun influence. As we near the end of our travels around the state, let's head back to where it all began.
We fired our guns and the British kept a-coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago.
That song, though factually inaccurate, was the #1 song in America in 1959. It's sung by Johnny Horton, another of the great talents that debuted on the Louisiana Hayride.
They began to running on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
The Battle of New Orleans actually took place in Chalmette in St. Bernard Parish. It's arguably the most significant battle on American soil ever fought against a foreign aggressor. And it was helped by Louisiana's favorite rogue. Hey, Jean Lafitte. You're Louisiana's most famous pirate.
Oh, pirate. I'm a privateer and entrepreneur.
You smuggled people and contraband.
And quite well.
You clashed with our governor, William C.C. Claiborne.
Not a fan.
Well, he put up signs here in the quarter offering $500 for your capture.
And I showed him.
Some say without you, America would have lost the Battle of New Orleans.
I hate the word hero, but yeah, it was kind of all me.
The British thought they could get Jean Lafitte to help with the invasion of New Orleans. But Lafitte knew the value of commodities paled in comparison to the value of information. So he approached General Jackson with an offer he just couldn't refuse. Technically, the Treaty of Ghent had already ended the War of 1812, but since both sides were yet to formally ratify the decision, the Brits, still scorned from the American Revolution decades before, believed they could dramatically snatch the port of New Orleans and regain a foothold in the New World. They were wrong.
How did they know we'd be here?
I don't know.
The battle commenced in the early morning hours of January 8th, 1815. Lasted less than 30 minutes.
It's Jean Lafitte, the traitor!
Lafitte's ragtag group of misfits repelled the British Empire, taking minimal casualties and inflicting major damage. The Crescent City and the nation were saved.
If it weren't for me, you'd be speaking English right now.
We do speak English.
You get what I'm saying.
Ah, New Orleans. Not so much a melting pot as a boiling pot, where this human gumbo began simmering centuries ago and remains a delicious mixture even today. It's a place in love with life, said Tennessee Williams, who called the French Quarter home while writing Streetcar Named Desire. Where else, said Walt Disney, can you find iniquity and antiquity so close together? Indeed, where else would a bordello be the birthplace of a unique American form of music?
There is a house in New Orleans.
From 1897 to 1917, the Big Easy created perhaps the most famous red light district in America.
Storyville was like adjacent to the French Quarter, and it was a legal red light district that a New Orleans city councilman by the name of Story thought they looked like bordellos. They had purple velvet walls and like chandeliers. Apparently, we tore it down, and it just makes, every time I go by there, just like, God, why did we do that?
We're at the Jazz Museum in the old U.S. Mint. And Dave, we know jazz got its start in New Orleans, and really Storyville was a big part of that story.
Storyville was a big part of it. I mean, the music started all over town, but Storyville was a big part because there were many music venues in there, such as the Big 25 and Pete Lala's all along Iberville Street, where a lot of the early greats got started, such as King Oliver, Kid Ory, and Jelly Roll Morton started playing literally when he was a teen in the brothels along Basin Street.
If Storyville wasn't the birthplace of jazz, it certainly was the nursery. And Louis Armstrong became the most famous of all New Orleans musicians.
I see trees of green.
A child of poverty who traveled the rocky road of rags to riches, from scorns to horns, sent to the poor waif's home for juvenile delinquents.
And I think to myself,
Armstrong was taken in by a Jewish family named Karnofsky, who hired him for menial jobs. The family also helped purchase the instrument, a cornet, that would propel him to become perhaps the most recognized and beloved New Orleanian ever. He got his nickname Satchmo because his mouth was so big it was said to resemble a satchel. And when it comes to female performers,
Miss Irma Thomas!
No one has had the staying power of Irma Thomas. Could Irma Thomas have happened anywhere but New Orleans?
No.
Why is that?
Because my early beginnings was right here in New Orleans, and the neighborhoods that I grew up in was surrounded by music. And I never had a clue that I would actually be in the business, but I was enjoying life because I've always loved music. And as a small child, when my mother couldn't find me, she knew where to come. She would find me in the nearest ballroom listening to the jukebox.
And I wish someone would care.
Do you remember when you were given the name the Soul Queen of New Orleans?
Yes, I do, because my drummer at that time, he didn't want to call me the singing grandmother. So he came up with the Soul Queen of New Orleans, and in 1989, they made it official.
The young lady you're about to meet, a distinctively different singer. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Irma Thomas.
You can blame me, try to shame me, and still I'll care for you.
When was the first time you ever sang?
Well, the very first time I ever sung was I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Where?
When I recognized I had a voice. In church.
In New Orleans?
Yes, in New Orleans.
I think a lot of
You got your start singing in the church, I guess?
Always, always. When you grow up in Louisiana, especially in the South, you belong to somebody's church because it was a given. You went to Sunday school and you went to church on Sundays, or you didn't go anywhere else. You didn't go to the movies. You couldn't go to the playground. You know, you had to sit on the steps all day long. So you went to church, and singing in the church was fun to me because being an only child, I got attention like that.
The traces of gospel continue throughout all forms of New Orleans music.
Oh, yes. I would say 90% of the local musicians from that era were brought up in some church of some kind, either Catholic church, Baptist church, sanctified church. But music was a part of their upbringing in the church, so it kind of gleaned over into their lifestyle of performing when they got into the business.
So let's have a splendid ovation for Mahalia Jackson, would you please?
In the 1940s, Mahalia Jackson was bringing prominence to an entirely different genre, gospel.
When they cruise see far, my Lord.
Rooted in the black churches of New Orleans. Her rendition of Move On Up a Little Higher was the first gospel song to reach the top of the charts. She later became the first female vocalist to ever win a Grammy. And later joined Satchmo as Louisiana's first two recipients of a Lifetime Grammy Award. Incidentally, the Grammy Award itself was named by a New Orleanian, Jay Dana, who in 1958 won a naming contest sponsored by the Recording Industry of America. In the 50 years since then, at least one, and usually more, native Louisianans was nominated at least every year, except two. Satchmo recorded a gospel classic that would come to define Louisiana. It took on even more significant meaning for the Crescent City when the NFL awarded a franchise to New Orleans and the Saints literally came marching in. Rock and roll, pop, and rhythm and blues all developed nationally in the 1950s and 60s. Antoine Fats Domino was at the forefront of each. From Blueberry Hill to Ain't That a Shame, Fats had 11 top 10 hits from 1955 to 1960.
You could never say that Fats Domino was underappreciated, but both the Beatles and Elvis revered Fats Domino.
Everybody loved him. Everybody loves Fats. Well, you have to understand, Fats kind of started this R&B rock and roll thing.
And another example of a Louisianan who shaped the course of music history.
Exactly. He shaped music in general.
I'm walking to New Orleans.
I met his agent, and he said, James, I could never get Fats to move out of New Orleans. I think Irma Thomas might be the most underappreciated vocalist ever. I mean, she's really appreciated down here, but she was sure, God.
You can have my husband, but please don't mess with my man. You can have my husband, but please don't mess with my man.
When You Can Have My Husband was recorded when?
I actually recorded You Could Have My Husband in late 1959, and I think they released it early 60. It's, believe it or not, it's one of my most requested songs. That, Hip Shakin' Mama, and It's Raining are three of my most requested songs. And ironically, Hip Shakin' Mama, a gentleman always asked me to sing that one. And a gentleman always asked me to sing You Could Have My Husband, too.
Well, that's interesting.
Well, when they don't understand that your husband is also your man, then they'll figure it out.
Jazz and soul are not the only two musical genres on which New Orleans has left an indelible mark. In 1859, the French Opera House opened at the corner of Bourbon and Toulouse Streets. It was believed to be the oldest opera house in America and stood until 1919 when destroyed by fire. In New Orleans, music is a family affair. Three surnames in particular stand out. The patriarch of the Marsalis family was Ellis Marsalis Jr., a jazz musician and educator. The musical gene he passed to his sons was supercharged. Branford, Wynton, Delfeo, and Jason. And there's the Baptiste family, the most famous of whom is John, a 6-time Grammy Award winner. And of course, the Neville family, the Neville brothers, Art, Charles, Aaron, and Cyril. Aaron's distinctive voice eventually led to a solo career. Art Neville founded the inimitable band, The Meters.
I can't think of any genre of music that New Orleans hasn't influenced in some way or another. Mainly because of the different cultures that have migrated to the state of Louisiana and specifically to New Orleans in general. We have to realize in our history back in the day, New Orleans was the only port city that connected America to the rest of the world. So a lot of people moved here in hopes to better their conditions. And instead of just bettering their conditions, they all put together the music, the food, and we became a city that's very unique to the world.